Liar. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Okay, that's what you say. Go get him if he's on. All right, well, fine. Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It's me. There's nobody else here. That's really it. I mean, we have the production staff in the background, too. But they're trying to stay quiet, you see. All right, well, it's time for the show to begin. And I figured, all right, I'll be the guy that tells you what time it is. It's 9 o'clock. What day it is. It's Thursday, September 30th, 2021. You know what that means. It's time for another show. If you did not know that, you would not be here. I don't know why I tell you this every day. But, okay, well, maybe I'm overreacting. I got a lot of other side business going on. Some might say it's actually my main occupation at the moment. But, all right, let's see. Let's concentrate on what's going on this morning on the show. I haven't paid any attention to what's going on, for the most part, on Twitter this morning, just because there's too many other things happening, but we can always take a cue from Bill. He usually tries to take a stab at what it is we'll be covering on the show today. The Kagro in the Morning show is live now. That's his conclusion. No comment on, whether or not that's a valid conclusion or how he arrived at it. It's probably so. We'll continue on now. Kagro X, me, David Waldman, has two choices. Good. Now we're talking. He can spend 2 hours talking about pumpkin spice. Ooh. That's something to do. What are we on, like 10 years of pumpkin spice complaints now? All right. Or laughing at cat videos, and that one sounds better. Let's try that one. Ha! Isn't it crazy that there are cat videos? Is that what we mean? Or actually watching them? Oh, well, I don't know if I'm going to do 2 hours of that. But anyway, I bet he'll pull a Kirsten Cinema, and do neither and just be an obstructionist jerk. That could be the case. That could be what I'm doing right now. It doesn't feel like the show has begun. We haven't talked about anything important. So maybe that's what I'm doing. How will you know? Right now, it's no different than if the show were being obstructed for 2 hours by, I don't know, some lunatic in a purple wig. That could be it. All right, well, I know what Greg has on his mind today. I wasn't paying too much attention to Twitter. What I did see was Greg running around trying to gather up information about what's happening and how to explain it this week. That is, what's happening on Capitol Hill. And when we say this week, we really mean today. Everything's been a prelude to today. Everybody's been working all week to try to get to a vote, or several votes, that they'll be holding today, except we don't know if they'll really be holding them. Because it's one of those things where it's a close count. Nancy Pelosi likes to have a very clear idea of exactly what is going to happen when she brings a bill to the floor and when they expect to vote. And if she doesn't have a clear picture of it, her tendency is not to go forward and see what happens. Very rarely is that, just strategically wise. And when you are Speaker of the House and you're in control of the floor agenda, it just doesn't make any sense. You don't want it. You don't want at any point want to lose votes that you were hoping to win on big basic issues, particularly if you might lose votes along the way to setting up the big vote and lose control of the rules under which the House will be debating things. It's complicated, etc. But basically, it's good practice. Don't do anything if you don't know how it's going to come out. And that's a good way of maintaining control of the floor. And, at the worst, the only thing that really happens is, if you don't hold the votes, is everybody begins to get the idea, if they're close Pelosi watchers or floor watchers, they get the idea, if the vote's not happening, or if they can't guarantee that the vote is going to happen, that means they don't know what the vote count is exactly. Or they do know what it is, and they don't have enough to pass, and they need to work on whatever handful of members are still holding out and get a guarantee from them before going forward. So, I don't know. They literally just basically left the floor yesterday. The congressional baseball game was held yesterday, which seems ill-timed and maybe a waste of time in general, given that, playing baseball with insurrectionists, who knows? What's the point? How many innings will there be? We don't know. They might try to overthrow the umpires in the third inning. But I guess for that, they were able to keep it together and be relatively civil. Not always the case, right? In fact, it was a couple of years ago during the practice for the congressional baseball game that some lunatic showed up and shot up the Republican practice. Remember? And that's how what's his name? Steve Scalise got shot. It was crazy. But nobody did that this time, thankfully. But let's see. I think I did see that John Ossoff got hit in the head by a pitch. Bounced off his helmet. He's fine. But that seems a little, untoward, perhaps. Anyway, but they had the baseball game in the middle of all this, which, suggests that everything's fine and they took time for a baseball game, so everything must be okay. But really, actually, I think they used the baseball game setting as a chance to talk to some of the members and get a feel for where they are. Not all members attend, of course, but it's kind of a social event. And I know that Jim Clyburn was saying, I'll know a little bit better where we are. He's the whip. After the baseball game, I'm going to go and talk to people. So I don't know. And I haven't caught up this morning, and I haven't figured out, if there's definitive word yet about whether or not they're holding votes. But I have seen Greg gathering up information about the mechanisms that will be in use in order to bring things to a vote, why they're having various votes. So I'm anticipating a certain set of questions, and God damn it, if we don't get them, who knows what's going to happen. Other stories in circulation today, I guess I would say the other Twitter chatter is about Corey Lewandowski. Some of the news about Corey Lewandowski is hard news and reported by reputable outlets that I've heard of and believe are making a relatively solid effort at backing up their story. Other stories about Corey Lewandowski are circulating widely but are based on pretty much rumor alone. And I don't know if they're true, but they're salacious, so we could share them with you. Just, noting that we don't know whether they're true or not. All right, Greg's here. The phone rang. I answered it. We're set. Let's go. Or as the internet kids say, let's go, I guess is how they're hearing it in their head with all those O's that they add. Good morning, Greg. You let's say you have the floor. You can ask the questions you've been dying to ask, or give me the answers you found.
Or both.
Yes.
Part of the problem is I don't always understand the answers to the questions that I got.
Oh, well, yeah.
But I'm glad you started with a procedure discussion because,
okay.
We got a lot of procedure questions today. And we'll get to the infrastructure and reconciliation stuff.
Yes. And
but
Corey
just like the
Lewandowski's
House and the Senate, not until we get to debt limit and government shutdown first.
Oh, shutdown. Okay, yes.
All right.
Sure.
And so I was trying to figure out, what's going on? What are they doing? People conflate the two, but they're a little bit different, even though they're very related.
Yes.
And one of the ways we learned this is because there was a very dramatic House vote yesterday on suspending the debt limit.
Dramatic. Where's my music? There we go. Debt limit. That feels fake, but okay. Yes.
It was fake with the usual Democratic bad boys, Jared Golden and Kurt Schrader voting no.
Schrader.
And Adam Kinzinger on the Republican side voting yes. So it passed the House.
Suspending the debt limit.
Suspending the debt limit until 2022. Now, right. Interesting reminder, the last time the debt limit was suspended was in 2019. So these things go for 2 years at a time. It's not like you suspend the debt limit for 3 days.
But not like
what's that all about? And that's different than what the Senate is going to do. The Senate said, no, we're not going to do that. We'll probably filibuster it. What we will do, though, is we'll prevent the government from shutting down a separate but related thing by appropriating enough money to fund the government until December of this year. That gives us a little wiggle room to figure out what the heck's going on here.
Yeah, on one thing. Right, okay.
And
You're right.
that
Separate
vote
stuff.
should be today, this afternoon,
Hooray.
following which the House will say, well, you screwed us on suspending the debt limit, so we'll just have to go along with this because the fiscal year ends tonight and the new fiscal year ends tomorrow.
Begins tomorrow. Yes, tonight.
New fiscal year begins tomorrow. And so there's this thing,
fiscal year
and it's not in the Constitution,
tonight.
it's statutory, which means it's a law. And as a law, Congress can change laws. They don't have to add amendments to the Constitution to do this. But there's something called the AntiDeficiency Act, the ADA,
yes,
which was enacted in 1884, so it's an old law.
Yeah.
Majorly amended in 1992, among other times. And basically, the Anti-Deficiency Act says, look, you can't enter into a contract that's not fully funded because doing so would obligate the government in the absence of an appropriation adequate to the needs of the contract. So the government shuts down if you don't fund it because the government's not allowed to pay bills with money they don't have. This I learned from our wonderful resource underutilized by me, the Congressional Research Service, which has a nice 3-pager on why governments shut down. So basically, if you do not appropriate money in the fiscal year to fund the government isn't allowed to keep going without those funds, and so it has to shut down unless you have a particular area, I don't know, maybe the Defense Department or CIA or something, which says separately, it's allowed to keep going because it's too important to stop.
Yeah, that's the application of the Anti-Deficiency Act that I'm familiar with. I guess the original purpose was, to remind everybody, I don't know why they really even needed to do that, but to remind everybody that there's a constitutional provision that says no money shall be drawn from the Treasury but by appropriation from Congress, which you would think would have been sufficient to say if you don't have money from Congress, you don't have money and you can't enter into a contract. But I guess they said nobody told me, so they had a law.
But that's the argument, and so that's why it's important to do this by tonight. And the fact that the House decided to approach this by getting rid of the debt, which we'll talk about next, for a couple of years.
Yeah, ignoring it.
Which is basically suspended. Ignore it.
Yes.
Is different than we're going to appropriate money, which means we have to borrow. And we can borrow up until about, October 18th, because Janet Yellen says just about that time the Fed hits its debt limit and then can't borrow anymore.
Yeah.
And the House said, well, why don't we just suspend that? And the Senate said, no, what we're going to do is we're going to do a short-term appropriation, but we're not doing anything for 2 years. And so you'll have to do it our way. And that's what will happen. And so the government presumably will not shut down tomorrow. So where does this debt limit stuff come from? That was fascinating. A separate CRS Congressional Research paper talks about that in depth. But one of our Twitter followers kindly directed me to this really interesting piece on NPR, which talks about where the debt limit came from. And interestingly, another favorite of the show, it came from the same era and the same time and almost for the same reasons as cloture.
Oh.
Right? Yeah. So take us back a century ago to 1917, Woodrow Wilson is president.
Right, I wish I had some old-timey music.
And he ran in 1916 as Keep Us Out of War. He kept us out of war.
Clumping.
Which war? That was World War I.
Yeah, which
and
we
so
were in.
He didn't want to go to war, and he ran and he won. But after he won, the Germans announced that they're going to have unrestricted submarine warfare on any merchant marine ship that is trying to go to Europe, to England.
Yes.
And Wilson said, well, we can't have that. We're going to arm those merchant marines. And there was a group of anti-war senators who said, we don't want to do that. That's a backdoor into going to war, which in fact it was. And, not too much longer, there was an actual declaration of war. But at the time, they wanted to stop that.
They were progressives.
And they blocked Woodrow Wilson from funding arming the merchant marine.
Well,
and Wilson got mad.
I mean, bad, I think. I don't know. Yes. Well, he's mad.
And he said, you can't do that.
That's outrageous.
That's outrageous. And so he said, I forget the term he used, a small group of small men can't block me from doing this. And he called a special session of Congress, and he essentially got the first cloture vote.
Yes, right. That part I remember, although I don't remember it being connected to the debt ceiling, but I guess you know.
The reason was it was part of the war effort.
Okay.
So he got his cloture. You knew that
do
part.
Some debt for you. Wars. Yeah.
And now he has to pay for arming the Merchant Marine. So he passed his first Liberty Bond Act. And he gets some billions in financing to do that. But that's not quite enough because now he's planning on actually going to war. He's building up a peacetime army. He institutes a draft. He needs $4 billion to arm the armed services as quickly as possible. He passes a second Liberty Bond Act, and this time he includes a limit on the overall indebtedness of the U.S. to $15 billion as a sweetener for the fiscal conservatives to make sure that they'll agree to vote for the money he needs. And they'll say, don't worry about it. We're not going to spend more than this. And they go, okay. And that was the first time the debt limit was added.
Well, okay.
So the same reason, I mean, World War I was the same reason that cloture was invoked. Wilson wanted to do this, and he needed cloture to get his votes. And Wilson wanted to do this, and he needed to add that debt limit in order to get the votes he needed to fund the war. So since then,
to end all wars. Good job.
We have this debt limit that periodically has to be dealt with.
Okay.
And it gets raised, and it gets put off, but that's where it comes from. And again, it's statutory, meaning it's not written in the Constitution. So Congress can get rid of it anytime they want to, and the world has changed since 1917, and it's not clear we need it anymore. And so the House took the approach of saying, well, let's just get rid of the debt limit. And the Senate said, no, we'll just, first of all, that allows you to get rid of a tool we use to block what you want to do. So we're not going to do that.
Right.
What we will do is we will appropriate, whether it's appropriate or not, they're going to appropriate money to keep the government open for a couple of months. That's what we'll do. You'll do it because we won't do it any other way. And so you're stuck. You got to do it by tonight. You'll do it our way. One of the many reasons the House hates the Senate. So the House will agree to what the Senate is doing because it's the only way. And that kicks the can of the debt limit down the road, but it doesn't get rid of it. And so that's something that they're going to argue about. But even though they may fund the government until December, the federal government will still run out of money by October 17th, according to Janet Yellen. And so the debt limit is still on the table in terms of, the two parties and the two houses having to deal with it.
Okay.
So that's what's going on. Today is a vote on keeping the government open. And although the House tried to make it a vote on suspending the debt limit, the Senate would not go along. And so they're interrelated and intertwined, but not the same thing.
Well, yes, that's true, and it was a good move for the House to try to. I mean, if they were like the Senate, what you do is you pass that combined debt ceiling, suspension, and continuing resolution to keep the government operating, and then you adjourn and leave town, and say you either accept this or you're shutting down the government.
Right, and that's part of it because the House said, well, we'll do both. And the Senate said no. The Republicans.
Yeah, they're going to say no, and then
the Republicans said we will not go along with both.
Yeah,
it has to be a clean fund the government.
Yes,
but we're not going to go along with this debt limit stuff. And so the House thought about doing that, but in the end, remember it was a very close vote. And so and in the beginning of that vote to suspend the debt limit, Pelosi didn't have the votes. She had to have a caucus and yell at the members and say you can't, have the Democratic Party look like we're in disarray when in fact we're not, at least over this, and convinced everybody and then did her usual brilliant vote counting, which she's good at, and said, okay, and Schrader and Golden, you're in red districts, or Schrader's just a red guy in a Democratic suit. And so you can go ahead and vote the way you want because I still have enough votes to make this pass. And Adam Kinzinger just gave her an extra vote to make sure that happened. Okay. So, that's all part of the wrangling in terms of what we're going to do and what we're not going to do. And, 2 days after this happens, nobody remembers anymore. But it was a big deal if it didn't happen, and it's no big deal if it does.
Yeah. Another good tool that they don't like to admit using, and maybe they don't even know they're using it, but a great way to string out the number of days that you'll have to work on the debt ceiling. The Fed thinks they'll run out of money on October 18th. A fun tool for extending that is not passing a CR and shutting down the government. And for every day you're closed, hey, that's a couple billion more dollars that we can stretch out on the debt limit. But they don't like to admit that they would do such a thing. But that would be super hardball. Republicans sometimes will threaten to do that. Democrats don't like to play that game. They don't like to play any games. But that would have been a fun thing. If you wanted to have the House hand them the combination bill and then leave town, and they say, well, we're not going to accept it, and the government will shut down. And you say, thanks, you just bought us an extra week before we hit the debt ceiling. And then they go, right. Fine.
And so here's a little background on the Senate maneuvering. Senate majority, this is from KION, which I think is in California, I'm not sure. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer announced Wednesday evening that an agreement had been reached paving the way for a Thursday vote in the chamber on continuing resolution, a CR, as they know it in Washington, which keeps the government funded at current levels for a set time period. We have an agreement, and we should be voting on that tomorrow, Schumer said. Beginning at 10:30 a.m. today, the Senate is slated to hold several amendment votes before voting on the continuing resolution. Those amendments will probably be about such things as sticking in a little bit of disaster relief for states that need it.
Sure.
The House is expected to take up the measure later Thursday once it's approved by the Senate. Now, congressional Democrats initially attempted to address the government funding issue alongside the debt limit, but it was thwarted by Republicans in the Senate who insisted that Democrats must act alone on the debt limit, which is what the House did yesterday.
Yes.
On Monday, the Senate took up a House-passed bill that would have extended the government funding to avert a shutdown and suspended the debt limit, but Republicans blocked the measure. In other words, the House already passed stuff that combined them, and Senate Republicans said, nope, we need a clean stopgap funding bill that we will support, but that debt limit stuff, we're not going for it. So that maneuvering happened earlier in the week.
Yeah, well, we got time on that.
Yeah. So, that it was just very confusing, and it is very confusing, but as confusing as it is and fascinating as it is in terms of the debt limit and cloture coming together from a 1917 preparation for war, the fact is in 2 days, nobody will care.
Yeah, but it's something to fill 2 hours with now.
Well, this is Kagro in the morning, and we kind of like procedure.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And reminding people there is such a thing called the ADA, which is the AntiDeficiency Act. It's not what you think. It's not the American Disabilities Act.
Yes.
And, it is the controlling authority for how come the government shuts down.
Well, that is interesting. I didn't even really think of it that way. The Anti-Deficiency Act, to me, the way I usually see it come up is, you mentioned that there are certain departments that sort of have special dispensation to do something to keep operating in the event of a government shutdown. A government shutdown doesn't shut down the armed forces and presumably certain aspects of the intelligence community, et cetera. Well,
here is Wikipedia. Here's what it says. The Anti-Deficiency Act is legislation enacted by the U.S. Congress to prevent the incurring of obligations or the making of expenditures or outlays in excessive amounts available in appropriations.
Yes.
The rest is practical in how it's used, but originally that's what it was for.
Yeah. All right. Well, yeah, like I said, I don't think I ever really learned the original intent. The only time it ever comes up is when there's a government shutdown. And,
well, you're not an original intent guy.
Yeah, right. And 1880 whatever isn't even an original intent anyway. So that's like, I don't know, like 5 or 6 score and 7 years after the original intent.
Yeah, how many Scaramucci's is that?
Forget it.
It's a lot.
Can't even do that math. But yeah, that's the thing that I always hear referred to when they say we're going to have a government shutdown, but the Army gets to keep operating. Anti-Deficiency Act apparently allows for that. Plus, there's some other aspect to it, like the Army is allowed to, if it's necessary, forage and or seize materials if it needs to in order to keep operating. An army in the field, in other words, can't come to a standstill because the appropriations bill didn't pass. So.
Right. And, everybody's entitled to go to sleep during this phase of the sausage making in Congress.
Yeah.
But I just first of all, since I don't know any of this stuff, I find it fascinating to learn a little bit about it in terms of what's going on and trying to figure out from news sources what they're actually talking about. Because, again, government shutdown and debt limit are related but different. Where it came from, why they're doing it. And at the same time, if you're looking at it from a politics point of view, the fascinating thing to me is we know that on the whole, these days in 2021, if Democrats say yes, Republicans say no, and vice versa. But where are the commonalities and common ground where you could actually, for example, get Republicans to agree to do something that's actually in the best interest of the United States? Since that's such a few and far between kind of thing, it's just interesting to see that shutting the government down is that thing, but dealing with the debt limit is not.
Yeah, well, and shutting the government down is very often not that thing, and they are traditionally getting themselves burned by doing that. They very frequently think it's a great idea and that they can argue that it is good for the country, and it has never worked that way for them, really. Yeah. So at least this time they're saying, okay, I understand that that's not such a great thing. And
especially in the middle of a pandemic when we're trying to argue that we're the responsible party.
Yeah. Well, okay. So they've decided not to play that game at the moment, and instead they will risk the stability of the worldwide economy on the debt limit. But I suspect they're ready to give in at some point on that too. So all right.
Right. Well, we'll get to the bilateral infrastructure and reconciliation toward the end of the next segment. But after the break, I want to talk to you a little bit about vaccine mandates.
Oh, okay. Good. We'll do that. That, of course, comes from World War I, probably, also. Because
actually from the Revolutionary War.
Revolutionary War, right? The other war, the war to begin all wars. Yeah. Then, later, the war to end all wars. Apparently had nothing whatsoever to do with the vaccines. I don't know. I just thought we'd throw it in there and blame it all on World War I.
Hi, I'm Scott Anderson, the guy that writes the daily summary for this show, Kagro in the Morning. Thank you to everyone that supports this show. Many of you send donations through PayPal, Patreon, Square Cash, Radio Public, and so on. Some of you write your own essays and send them in, or read articles with your own commentary. We appreciate it. Now, some of you are listening to this and thinking, I'd like to help, but isn't there something I could do that wouldn't require money or effort? Why, yes, there is. You can just like us. On Daily Kos, they call it the recommend button. YouTube has a thumbs up. There are hearts and likes and love buttons. Tap our love button. Tap our love button every day. Share our shows and summaries on Facebook and Twitter, YouTube and iTunes, Stitcher and Amazon. Most of these places allow you to write a review, so a sentence or two would be great. Recommend us to social media, or tell your friends to listen to the show. You aren't just helping us, you're helping them find their new favorite thing to listen to. You could change the world. So thank you in advance from me and everybody else in the world.
All right, welcome back, everybody, to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We were just having more of the Kagro in the Morning Show during the break. Do you want to answer that now,
or do we want to do it? I didn't fully understand. Okay. Because just reading an article doesn't make you an expert. So the House decided that they were going to suspend the debt limit, which they did. The Senate wouldn't go along. We already talked about that.
Right.
And my question to David is, how is suspending the debt limit, which is what the House did yesterday, going to help avert a government shutdown tomorrow? Because suspending the debt limit still doesn't appropriate money to pay for the government.
And that's a good addition to the question there. How does it help prevent the government from shutting down tomorrow? It doesn't. That will have nothing to do with whether or not we shut down tomorrow. It could be said to have something to do with whether or not the government would shut down on or about October 18th, when we would otherwise hit an effective debt. We would. It's not that we. This is another weird thing. We'll clean up the language in a moment, but for illustrative purposes, around the 18th is when the Treasury says we can no longer use accounting tricks to keep the government going. If we shut down tomorrow, it's because the government hasn't appropriated annual funding for various departments of the government. And anybody, by the way, whose appropriations bills have passed, even if it's just the Department of Energy, they get to keep going. But if the Department of State has not had its appropriations finished, they've got to close. So sometimes you get a partial government shutdown. That's how you get one of those. But I don't think anybody's had their appropriations done because the Senate hasn't finished any appropriations. So it would be a total government shutdown if there were no continuing resolution to appropriate money that we're technically still allowed to appropriate because we haven't, quote unquote, hit the debt ceiling yet. On October 18th, even if they pass a continuing resolution or pass all the appropriations bills, on or around October 18th, in the absence of action on the debt ceiling, the Treasury will say, it's very nice that you decided that you would appropriate this money, but there isn't anything in the Treasury to meet those appropriations with, and so therefore you're shut down for that reason. It's not that the government is shut down because they don't have a budget in place. It's that there's $0 in the Treasury to give you to work with.
So what the Senate is doing today to appropriate at the current levels until December, in fact, doesn't push it down till December. It pushes it till October.
Yeah, in effect, right. I mean, there'll be plenty of appropriations in place on October 19th, or lots of paper that says, Treasury, if you got any money, you're now allowed to give it to this department and that department. And the Treasury says, we haven't for a long time. We've been borrowing the money. The problem is we've exceeded our ability to borrow to, it doesn't magically, well, it's a very stupid fiscal system that we have, of course. And we've learned so much about modern monetary theory, too, that reminds us, well, what you literally can go over to the mint and print some and say we have money. That's allowable, but we don't do that. Instead, we borrow it, and you're not allowed to borrow anymore. That is, sell any of those treasury bonds or what Wilson called them, the Liberty bonds. Can't sell any bonds, can't raise any money because you've gotten to the number that's the magic stop point that they invented during World War I and have raised ever since. The other weird thing, of course, is the difference between raising the debt limit and suspending the debt limit. That's why we have to clean up the language. We've already hit the number a long time ago, I guess in 2019. If not before, we hit the statutory limit for how much you can borrow. It's just that since 2019 and maybe for some time before, I can't recall what other times which options.
I think the Trump administration did it twice, and often for like a year and a half, 2 years at a time.
So there they just said basically, okay, for sake of argument, we say the debt limit for the United States of America it's I don't know, we'll pick it up. Oh, it was $1 trillion. It's way beyond that, but for the sake of illustrating it, $1 trillion. You've now borrowed $999 billion, and you're approaching the debt limit. So two ways of dealing with this. You can say, we will now raise the debt limit to $2 trillion and give you, twice as much room, and you can go and borrow up to another $1 trillion. Or you say, we don't care that the number on the paper says $1 trillion. What we're saying isn't that it's raising, not that it's going up. It's just that you are now hereby allowed to just raise more money anyway for this period of time. And you can do things that way, or you can
or you can do a third thing,
okay.
Which they won't accept because that would make you a radical akin to trying to get rid of the filibuster. And you can say the debt limit is a vestige of World War I. Why don't you just get rid of it altogether?
Right. You could absolutely do that.
It's just a law. It's not the Constitution. You can just pass a law.
And you do very well there to remind everybody of how it came about, right? You say, well, look, this was brought up by Woodrow Wilson to placate fiscal hawks in, 1917. And, well, we'll set a debt limit. If we say I won't spend more than this amount of money, will you vote for selling bonds so we can do the war thing? All right, fine. Now, well, that didn't work out because that was never the limit. And so it's just been a joke since 1917. How badly do you really want to continue with this nonsense if it's threatening the country and now, because of our position in the world economy? And if you say, yeah, that's dumb, then you can see why you might say that 1917 law that promised that we would never, ever, ever spend more than the debt ceiling that we've had to raise and suspend and all sorts of things 100 times in the past 100 years, maybe we're getting the idea that this is kind of dumb. And so, nothing could be better than to point out the origins of it and say, oh, that's why I have it. Because there are people who will think, well, the federal debt, that's like a super serious thing. Like lots of people in suits say we have to worry about it, and there's like a clock that counts it and everything, so it must be important. Think about how much money they must have spent on that clock. But it really isn't anything important, and you can get rid of it. And, if you really want to keep an accounting of things, write down how much we borrowed. We'll pay you back.
So that was a very helpful lesson. And, I know more than I did this morning when I woke up about all of this stuff. Here's another history lesson for you, and a reminder that George Washington felt that he lost the Battle of Quebec, a battle you probably don't even know happened. I learned about it when I was in Canada, not in grade school.
Well, I'm not going to tell you about
where the Americans were defeated in Quebec City. And the partial reason for that is that Americans had smallpox. And Washington didn't want that to happen again, so he had a vaccine mandate. And he mandated troops get vaccinated. That was something of a problem. 1% to 2% of the troops would die from that sort of vaccination, but it got better. I only bring that up because vaccination mandates are very much American. It's not anti-American, it's pro-American, and it goes back a long, long time.
Yes.
And nowadays, there's a COVID pandemic, as you probably have heard. And Joe Biden has encouraged businesses and states and the federal government, where applicable, to institute mandates. And a series of articles here this morning I think are important. This is Aaron Blake. The evidence is building. Vaccine mandates work, and they work well. A union representing Massachusetts state troopers sought to make a splash this week in its fight against the state's coronavirus mandate. Dozens of troopers had submitted resignations, said the State Police Association in Massachusetts. Boy, what happens if cops can't fight crime? But the reality is far from as dire as seemed. The totality of the anecdotal data we have so far on coronavirus mandates points to one conclusion: they work quite well. 2 bits of context. The troopers come from a force of about 2,000, and the dozens could be as little as 1% the troopers, and turns out that in reality, way less than that actually were involved. It's not clear how many troopers will leave the force. As of Monday, the Massachusetts State Police said only 1 trooper had retired.
Oh.
Okay.
Well,
United Airlines is one of the first big companies to adopt a mandate. It announced this week that 98.5% of its employees have been vaccinated. The success of the mandate approach is even more evident when you compare it with another big carrier, Delta. Delta 2 has sought to apply pressure on employees, charging a $200 per month health insurance surcharge. And it, too, has seen compliance grow only to 82%. It could grow ahead of November 1st when the unvaccinated employees' pocketbooks start getting hit. But United is way ahead of the game when it comes to employee vaccinations. And then there's New York. The entire system has gone from about 3/4 of hospital employees and nursing home workers to 92%. Strong Memorial in Rochester, 95.5%. Albany Medical Center, where I trained, 200 of its 11,000 employees did not get shots or did not seek exemptions. That's around 2%. And remember, when they say employees, we're talking about people who do food service, clean the floors,
certainly
administrative work that has nothing to do with patient care. These are not necessarily nurses, doctors, etc.
Yes.
St. Barnabas Hospital in the Bronx went from 20% unvaccinated to 3%. Bassett Healthcare Network in Central New York, 97% vaccinated, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then Tyson Foods, vaccination rate went from 50 to 80. Truman Medical Center in Kansas City, Missouri, below 1% lost their jobs. Houston Methodist, the famous one that we started with, had 153 employees out of 26,000, a rate of about 0.5%. And North Carolina's hospital system announced Tuesday 175 of its 35,000 employees, 0.5%, were fired for refusing the vaccines.
Okay.
Now, last week, The system had announced the suspension of 375 employees, but about 200 of them went and got their vaccines and came back.
Oh, yeah, hell with that. I'm getting, okay, sure, good.
That's so do they work? Yeah, they work pretty well. Now, that's important. Mike Hiltzik has a column in the LA Times, similar stuff. Few have quit their jobs, but thousands have gotten shots. And that Aaron Blake piece, of course, was important. Dave Lenhart, vaccine mandates work. They lead more people to get shots, including some who initially said they'd rather be fired and by extension reduce COVID cases and deaths.
Yeah.
And has a nice newsletter about it. Immunization mandates aren't new. One helped win the American Revolution. Well, you knew that because you listened to the show.
Right. Battle of Quebec. One of several.
And then taking it back to politics, Ryan Matsumoto from CBS notes an important aspect of analyzing the political impact of vaccine mandates is the impact they have on COVID cases, hospitalizations, and deaths. The summer COVID surge took a toll on Biden's approval. That needs to turn around for him to bounce back. So since they work, you'd expect COVID to get better control. Turns out the numbers are dropping anyway at the moment. And what remains to be seen is how much benefit Biden gets from saying we stuck to the course, we stayed the course, our approach was the correct one, and look at the benefit now. So you're going to have to wait and see for that. So as we get through this rough patch with Congress being Congress and Congressing at their speed, which is slow and lots of diversions, keep that in mind with the bigger picture in terms of how we approach 2022.
All right. We should do that.
So speaking of Congress, and we promised we would get to that, Jake Sherman wrote last night, if infrastructure fails tomorrow, that means today, or is pulled, this process isn't over. It would be a momentary blow, but not fatal. Why might it fail or be pulled, as David started the show with? If you don't have the votes, you generally don't take a vote on something and let it fail.
Yeah, you try not to. I mean, it's a preference. You can work around it. But
right? There's a lot of things you can or can't do. But what's happening now, and we talked about this on Monday, we talked about it on Wednesday, there are probably enough votes for the infrastructure bill, including with Republicans, if there's satisfaction on the part of progressives that enough progress is being made on reconciliation. And Democrats in the House are making all the right noises about reconciliation. The problem, of course, is in the Senate. And the two problems, the bigger public relations but probably smaller negotiating problem is with Manchin. And the bigger negotiating problem is with Sinema. There's a very interesting piece about Kristen Sinema in the New York Times, which starts out with talking about where she stands relative to Arizona, the swing state, the purple state, not blue state. Kristen Sinema is at the center of it all. Some Arizonans wish she weren't. Centrist senator is key to President Biden's agenda in Washington. Her positions have angered some Democrats back home. And talks about the fact that, basically Arizona's a third, Democrats, Republicans, slightly outnumbering Democrats, and independents. Here in Connecticut, independents outnumber the Democrats who outnumber the Republicans, but in Arizona, it's pretty much a third. And Sinema's approach may be aimed at those independents more than the Democrats. But it's interesting that at least the part that I honed in on is this little section in that New York Times piece about all of that. Ms. Sinema's defense of the filibuster brought grumbles of approval one recent afternoon from the conservative members of the Rusty Nuts Classic Car Club, who were gathered around a table at the American Legion Hall in Chandler, a Phoenix suburb, where many voters split their ballots to vote for Ms. Sinema, but Doug Ducey, conservative Republican for governor.
All right.
Pat O'Dell, retired court clerk. I appreciate that she's not way left-leaning like the rest of them. Ms. O'Dell said she wanted to see a total closure of the southwestern border and wanted Ms. Sinema to reject the $3.5 trillion Democratic social spending bill outright. And here's the important line. But even if that happened, would Ms. O'Dell actually vote for Ms. Sinema or anybody else with a D next to their name? Mm-hmm. Probably not, she said.
Yeah.
And there, in a nutshell, is American politics.
Okay.
Right?
Yes.
So the companion piece to that is Jonathan Bernstein writing in Bloomberg Opinion, popular policies don't win elections. It's one thing for a citizen to register support for a program in a public opinion poll. It's quite another to cast a vote. And, if you want to know what he's talking about, just go back to Ms. O'Dell. Perfect example of that.
Yeah.
I love what she's doing. If you ask me, I'll tell you I love Kirsten Sinema. You voting for her? Nah, never. Not in a million years.
That's dumb. But it's true. They do that.
If you're tribal and you're voting your identity, then policy has nothing to do with it. You're either a white nationalist or you're, a Christian nationalist or you're not. And if you're not, I'm not voting for you, say a lot of conservatives.
That's probably
And that's
true.
how Ron DeSantis can kill off half of Florida and they don't care.
Yeah. Well, just get the right half.
Right. I mean, you can find your support in polls. Polls are great for that. And that's helpful because it's like a necessary but not sufficient thing to win. Like if you're doing stuff that people hate, they won't vote for you. If you're doing stuff that people like, that doesn't necessarily mean they vote for you. But it's helpful to have that because then you can go on to the other thing, which is, how do you get the emotional side and the tribal side to support you?
And, by contrast, I guess we could just throw in, so there were grumbles of support, I guess, for her position on the filibuster, but it should also be noted that there are plenty of people who say, will cast their votes, and then you say, well, but that person did this or that on the filibuster, and that's like a long-standing tradition in the Senate. And people say, what? I don't even know what that is. Or I don't care about that. Or I never heard that. It doesn't matter. And so a lot of votes cast in the Senate or positions taken in the Senate based on the idea that people will really, really love or really, really hate what they do on procedure. And all polling since they've begun asking these questions, as far as I know, has shown that most people answer, I don't know what the hell that is.
Right.
I didn't hear about that. So,
well, my
totally
opponent
point, but
in this
reminded me
debate
for some reason.
keeps hitting me on being fiscally irresponsible, to which I say, well, what about the AntiDeficiency Act?
Right.
Okay, now it's your turn.
Yep.
That really worked.
Yeah, that was terrific. And for 40 years, people have been walking into the polls saying, well, I'm a fiscal conservative, so I'm voting for the guys who run the national debt up and double it and triple it every time they're in office. The fiscal conservatives.
You want to bring it down to its simplest form. You're a fiscal conservative, so am I. Vote for me. Well, what have you done to prove that? That's not the point. The point is I used the right words. I said I was. That's what you're going to remember.
That too. And
Watch
sometimes they don't even
not
say
what
it.
I do.
Sometimes they say the opposite, but they do say, well, there is an R after my name. And everybody knows that for the past 50 years, that has meant...
we're anti-crime,
right.
Pro-defense,
right.
and fiscal conservatives.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Well, what about the insurrection and all that and Trump? Well, that's not the point. The point is those things you like.
The things that the things that came to mind when we asked you, what does it mean to be a Republican? There.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't read what Trump said. Who's Trump? I don't know who he is. But I will tell you, I'm a fiscal conservative. That's really what you care about. So I'm reading this tweet by Zach Batanis, and he cites Third Way Matt B. Good old Third Way, right?
Yeah,
and listen to this quote. We will lose moderates if we're running on a record that is not attractive enough to voters. Reconciliation is vital. And I think we'd agree that the infrastructure bill is necessary but not sufficient. And that comes from a Politico piece that says the White House is fine with the help progressives are raising in an effort to put pressure on Manchin and Sinema. Any help is welcome. So those are words that may look okay on paper, but don't necessarily make any sense. I'm glad that Third Way Matt B thinks that reconciliation and infrastructure should go together and they should both pass. That's wonderful. But the idea that this is putting pressure on Manchin and Sinema, as we talked about at the beginning of the week, you can't put pressure on Manchin. He's from West Virginia. And it's very difficult to put pressure on Sinema when you don't know what she wants. And she's from a state that's a third. And she can claim support from independents plus the other two, enough to cobble together a win so she doesn't feel pressure the way you think she does.
Yeah. Well, that is pretty interesting. I mean, I guess, certainly Matt B at Third Way isn't going to wake up and come to the realization that, I actually don't matter to Manchin and Sinema. But I imagine that they approach this by saying, I'm sure that what will happen is they will say, even the fiscally conservative Third Way folks who make a point of departing from democratic orthodoxy whenever possible.
And everybody knows they're fiscally conservative because they tell us they are.
And so then the purple wig lady says, what? Who? I don't even, what? Yeah, so it makes no difference to her. Manchin is Manchin, and he wouldn't admit it even if it was true. So,
right.
Yeah,
So all I'm saying, to
what?
progressives who are making logical, sensible, true, and important arguments, that may have nothing to do with what happens politically.
Yeah.
It's frustrating, and that's why this week is so depressing for progressives.
Yeah.
Because, the righteousness of the cause, the logic of the argument, the clear need, and the clear-eyed way to get there with paying for it properly may all be in place, and then there's politics.
Yeah. All those things. Man, there's a lot.
But anyway, that's my summary of the week so far.
And I'm proud to have heard it.
I really thank you for the explanation about the first part. It may seem a little wonky, but it's dominating the news today, and boy, it's really nice to actually know what they're talking about.
Yeah, isn't it nice when they know? You'd like to think that the people doing the voting on Capitol Hill know. They don't always, by the way, even though it is the Congressional Research Service. This is done for their benefit, but they don't always read it, and sometimes it's not necessary.
Well, the nice thing about shutting the government down, and I have a feeling somebody at the CRS knew this, like some of their reports are really in depth, and they can be like 25, 30 pages. But the one about shutting the government down is 3 pages. Like even a Republican congressman could read it.
That's true, right? It fits within, was it Herman Cain's had the idea of keeping everything down to 9 pages, or was that some other 9 from his tax plan?
I don't know. I thought he was a 666 guy.
Somebody had a 3-page thing.
Or a 999 guy.
Yeah.
But I was pretty sure it was 666. He just got it backwards.
Or upside down. Yeah. All right. Very good. Thank you for bringing up the Battle of Quebec. That's helpful. Gives me a segue to Canada, which has some stuff going on today.
Oh, good. Anyway, so that's Thursday. That's the end of the week. Anything that happens between now and Monday isn't my fault, but we'll get to it on Monday, at least for me. You'll do some of it tomorrow. And you got another hour to go. So
crap.
Don't go away, folks. Stay tuned and don't change that radio dial, because Kagro in the Morning will be finishing up the hour and then back for another. I won't. And so too bad for you and good for me. And I'll see you on Monday.
Yes. Okay. Very good. Oh, before you go, I have to play your comment about the vaccine. But we did get a Twitter comment. Shoot, I have to scroll back and find out who it was. I haven't had one of these yet. That said, I'll find it. But said, hey, don't natter during Greg's time.
What?
Yeah. I was like, what? I'm supposed to. That was the whole, there's like an article that we read twice that said I'm supposed to do that.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's cooperative interrupting. Or whatever the term is there.
Last Fish Eaten is the Twitter handle that we're talking about. D. Allen is the more normal sounding name attached to that. But thank you for listening and throwing in that fun comment too. I don't think I've had one of those yet.
If you weren't, I wouldn't be able to do this. I wouldn't be able to sustain this for an hour. You can do that. I can't. I need you there so I could talk over you. Right.
You want to know what Greg's segment would sound like if I didn't do that? Hello? Am I still?
Right. Is this
hello?
on?
That's how the whole thing would go. You better believe I'm going to natter during Greg's segment. But I think I must have tried to crack a joke over some important point from CRS. Probably. Sorry about that.
Anyway, take care, and I'll talk to you Monday.
You do the same. Have a good weekend.
Take care, and I'll talk over you Monday.
Yes, right. And remember, everybody.
Oh my God, get the vaccine already, you Never gets old. Take care.
Well, you know what? Okay. It does.
Freaking mandated.
Right. Okay. And the weekend is a good time for everybody to get those vaccines too. I mentioned that Canada's having a big day. Canada's having a big day because 2 Canadians have spoken to me this morning. One, Ricky, the Kanakistani, says, questions how come Canada has never has fights to keep the government operating. It seems like it's a constant thing, a constant fight going on in the U.S. And I assume the answer is Canadian politeness and something else, but I'm not sure what it is. I mean, it's just a different system of government. But now I think maybe the question has been answered by Greg's recitation of the stupid history that brought us to having a debt ceiling. And, well, let's see, but we are usually having government shutdown fights about funding. And, I assume it just comes from having adopted different methodologies of funding the government. And that is to say, I suppose, if you're right, Canada having adopted a good one and our having adopted a bad one. But I don't know. I just don't know enough about the appropriations process in Canadian government. Do you really never have a fight about that? And it may be also that, like I said, you've adopted a very basic difference in the style of government as possible. We very purposefully sketched out for ourselves a system whereby spending, it's so dumb to have to say this, given what we've really been doing and how much money we've really been spending. We sketched out a system whereby Congress was supposed to keep a very tight grip on the purse strings. That it's the sole reason that the word purse strings still is in use in modern American usage, in modern American language, is because, we have this ancient 200 and something years, tie to the idea of Congress controlling the purse strings. And I think it was, I don't even know why we did it that way, but most things that we did that way during the founding period were reactions to popular discontent with British governance and administration. Whereas, for Canadians, a lot of what you do is because there was no such discontent, or at least you didn't express the same discontent, or not in the same way, or none at all, because you continued to be British subjects for X number of years. And so a lot of it carries over. I guess the reason that Canada doesn't seem to have that fight is basically whatever the reason is that Britain doesn't have that fight, because pretty much everything is a holdover from the British system, generally speaking. I don't know how much reform there was in finally establishing the independence of Canada. But why didn't we do the same thing? Basically because we said, like Republicans now, if the Democrats, if Biden or Obama are for it, we're against it, we did the same thing. British, no thanks. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Wow, everything sounds totally different now. I popped my ears while I was coming back. I get a yawn and the ears popped, and it's like, what happened? Everything sounds totally different now. Okay, let's see. Oh, yes, right. I was saying why, part of my guess as to why the American system is so different from the Canadian is that we just rejected as many British things as possible. Not everything. We kept the common law system, the language, etc., slavery for a while. But, we were the original Brexit back then. Of course, Brexit now is Britain exiting from Europe. We were Brexit in the sense that we were exiting from Britain, and all things British were kind of unpopular. They couldn't get over the tea thing for a while, but eventually we did. And went with a much more American coffee. Anyway, the other Canadian item of the day is brought to you by the other Canadian who's spoken up, Brian Monroe, who brings us this actually interesting and new item here. Remembering residential school victims. You may recall that over the summer in particular, right, there was a renewed focus on the tragic abuses that were, I would say, rediscovered among, or in the setting of Canada's now, I believe, defunct residential school system that they operated. Residential schools essentially being, just what they sound like, boarding schools, but specifically they were run they're run by the, what do we call it? White settler population of Canada, Canadians, who knows? But I guess the ostensible purpose was the education of the Native American population, the First Nations, as they call them in Canada. We would say Native American population. And anyway, the whole premise of this thing being, oh, well, this happened in Canada. That happened in the United States, too. The United States had a very extensive residential school system as well. The difference being Canada apologizes for things that they do wrong, and we don't. So September 30th, today, last day of the month, September 30th, same thing in Canada. They don't have a different calendar or anything. There's no Eastern Orthodox September 30th. September 30th is Canada's now first annual, presumably, it's declared now to be annual. Next year they'll do it too. This is the first one, first annual National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, which the clip Brian sends me, the screen grab, tells me is a new holiday to honor, with a U, the lost children and survivors of the residential school system. There's a link in there to read about the story, but it's a picture and I can't click on the link. But you know the story. I think you know the story. I knew the story, which was an amazing thing when it was being more widely publicized over the summer. But I knew the story because I had heard the story from Meteor Blades, Tim Lang, who's one, of course, Native American himself, and two, I believe, is a veteran of residential school situations in his youth. So, I mean, I think you all probably read those stories. We could spend a year on those stories, but the Canadians had a very big reckoning with it over the summer. The Americans looked the other way, even though, again, they could have just read Canadian news and then said, we really just ought to do the same thing. We didn't even have to have our own reckoning. Just say, if it's good enough for the Canadians, it's good enough for us. But that's never the case. The Canadians are always way ahead of us on things like that. And that's why they have a national healthcare system and we don't. But thank you for bringing that up. An important day, and we'll see if we can remember from year to year that September 30th is that day. And you can remind us, if you would be so kind. But if you've never read Meteor Blades or any of the Native American writers who make a conscious effort to write about Native American issues at Daily Kos on any subject, but on residential schools, you should. Because a lot of it comes from firsthand experience. A lot of it comes from, secondhand experience. My parents went through this, et cetera, but enormous numbers of Native kids. What they're talking about in this, particular Remembrance Day is kids died there. Many more traumatized, of course, but survived. But, remembering both those lost and those surviving, I'm sure, in this National Day of Truth and Reconciliation. Astounding story. More astounding still that it lasted as long as it did. I mean, well into the latter half of the 20th century. It wasn't until, I think, in some cases, the early 80s when at least some of the American and probably Canadian residential schools were finally closed. And, we forget that there's this in the United States, they even for a while actually had a storied history. These are great things. I mean, and the origins of them, it's not like they got warped either. The origins, you know how you say things are a product of their times as a polite way of saying, oh my God, you'd never be able to, how could you even say something like this anymore? Back in the day when they established the residential schools, they actually were running around proud of themselves and saying things like, what this is all about is we're going to wipe out the Indians. We're going to, what they said, I think the American founders of the residential school movement actually came out and said something like, the whole purpose is to, kill the Indian, save the man, to impose Western education, to be sure, but also Western religion, to convert them to Christianity. And a lot of them were operated, therefore, under religious auspices, and it's just that much more upsetting to find out that not only were they, in many cases, horribly abusive to the kids, but the whole situation was stupid to begin with, because it began by saying, we will remove these children from the custody of their parents and move them sometimes hundreds of miles away from where they were already living, hundreds of miles away from where they wanted to be living, on reservations. And then, of course, the true, mind-blowing tragedy of a lot of it was a lot of the kids were malnourished, maltreated. They died, and the approach was, well, they're dead. Bury them in the backyard of the school. And by the way, what are we going to do? Tell the parents? The parents are just Indians on a reservation. We don't have to tell them anything. They probably won't understand it anyway, because they were so bigoted and ridiculously prejudiced. But it can't be explained here. But it's great reading, and you ought to look. And thanks, Ricky. It says it's good production assistance here. The last residential school in Canada, I guess, closed in 1997, in case you thought that was ancient history. I said they had a storied history in the United States, and I guess what I meant was, I was thinking, if you know anything about the legend of sports, icon Jim Thorpe, right, who was Native American himself. He was we all, I don't know, I guess we just learned that he was a graduate of, he was proud to have graduated from the Carlisle Indian School in Pennsylvania, Carlisle, Pennsylvania. And, for years, decades afterwards, Carlisle was proud of Jim Thorpe, who was, of course, a great athlete. And, they made a big deal out of it. The Carlisle Indian School is here. That's where Jim Thorpe went. And as opposed to, this is in hindsight, this is, of course, like saying, oh yeah, I don't know what towns are nearby. What was in my hometown? Auschwitz. It was awesome. It was hugely famous. Everybody knows Auschwitz, right? Carlisle, hometown boy makes good in the Olympics. That wasn't his hometown. All right. But I don't know. I bring that up because that's part of something that, most Americans say, even if they're not history buffs, say, oh yeah, I've heard the name, even if I'm not necessarily familiar, and I got the idea. Or if they are familiar, say, sure, he went to the Carlisle Indian School. Yeah, he was an inmate at Auschwitz, just offhandedly. He was a student of, he was kidnapped, I guess, and brought to the Carlisle Indian School. Okay. That's just great. Okay. Let's see. Brian sends me a link here too. I guess some more reading about this. Might as well just stick with this because, it can't just drop you Auschwitz. Anyway, so Corey Lewandowski, he's a perv. Let's talk about that. He sent me to a HuffPost piece from when? This is it's an old piece, but it's an old story. 2013. Right around this time of year, as a matter of fact, October 4th, 2013, updated in January 22nd, 2018, why a government shutdown would never happen in Canada. Okay, well, it's not about the residential schools, but the other Canadian item of the day, the latest U.S. government shutdown dominated headlines this week. All right, well, we know all about this. What's the story here? Prompting questions as to whether a similar situation could happen here. They don't even know. I sat down with my colleague at Samara, Jane Hilderman. Okay, I'm lost, but okay, to talk about the government shutdown and why, for better or worse, it can't happen in Canada. What's at the heart of a government shutdown like the sort we're seeing in the U.S.? Okay, comparative government lesson, everybody. This is interesting. Thank you. But yes, by the way, there are plenty of links, probably some at HuffPost too, about the residential schools. Spend some time with it. That's my recommendation to you. All right, so where were we here? The latest U.S. government shutdown, this was back in 2013, dominated headlines in that week. Can it happen in Canada? I don't know. As he says, I sat down with a colleague at Samara, which makes... Samara? Samara? There's no indication how you would pronounce that. What is that? Well, the answer is it is the Samara Center... and Canada, so CENTRE, for Democracy is a nonpartisan charity dedicated to strengthening Canada's democracy. So that answers everything. All right. It's an institution. They sat down together Why can't it happen? And Allison Loat, L-O-A-T, is the interviewer. This is not the first time the U.S. federal government has had to shut down. Blah, 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 blah. I mean, it's an important question, but let's just get to it. What's at the heart of the government shutdown of the sort we're seeing in the U.S.? That part, I guess we actually know. By the way, Jane Hilderman answers, yes, we are seeing this all the time. This is the 18th time this sort of shutdown has happened. That was back in 2013. When the government's functioning, money to be spent on a federal bureaucracy is approved by Congress, signed off on by the president. At present, the Republican-controlled House of Representatives and the Democrat-controlled Senate fundamentally disagree about spending on the Affordable Care Act. Hey, so a budget has yet to gain majority support in both the House and the Senate. If they can't pass the bill, the president has nothing to sign, and public money is not passed on to the bureaucracy. West Wing fans may be reminded of that episode from season 5. I'm not. When President Bartlett refuses to pass, or I guess sign, really, the Congress-approved budget. Not that that matters. He can veto it, of course. But also, by the way, I don't know what they were trying to say, but they couldn't be talking about the budget because the budget is a resolution and it doesn't go to the president. There must be appropriations bills, perhaps an omnibus appropriations bill that he refused to sign. He can refuse to sign it. That doesn't do anything. He has to veto it in order to block it. Allison, asking the next question, says, our parliament is currently prorogued. Oh, hey. Again, 2013. Don't panic, Canadians. You're not prorogued now. Prorogued until October 16th. And I've noted some people on Twitter cheekily, it's cute, asking, so is the U.S. prorogued? Is there a confusion of terms? And Jane says, and we know about proroguing, right? We know about proroguing Parliament, which, not Canada, but Britain did recently over the Brexit nonsense for some amount of time. And we do have a mechanism of sorts for that, although we usually actually do things backwards. You can call Congress back into session. I don't know if we have a proroguing provision. Anyway. Jane, the answer lady, says, in some ways, shutdown and prorogation are opposites, though in truth, they aren't comparable. Prorogation in parliamentary terms is used regularly to end a session of parliament until the prime minister calls members of parliament back to a new session with a speech from the throne. During prorogation, MPs are not at work in the House of Commons, though they are in their constituencies, but the rest of the federal government is still working and being paid. The opposite is true in the U.S. Despite a shutdown of the federal government services, Congress is still in session, and elected representatives are still at work, though the non-essential bureaucracy itself is unpaid and not working. P.S. The members of Congress are paid. Why are they paid? Remember, constitutional provision that says they shall be compensated for their services, so you can't stop the checks for members of Congress. Allison, the question lady, asks, Canada's parliamentary democracy is quite different from America's system, but could a similar shutdown ever happen in Canada? What would be the circumstances? The answer, both yes and no. I like this answer so far. Like the U.S. and most other democracies, Canada's nationally elected representative body, the House of Commons, national, authorizes the use of public money. Proposals to spend public money or raise it through taxes are initiated in the House, then approved by the Senate. Constitutional sticklers will note that financial decisions require approval of the Crown as well, represented here by the Governor General. But in almost all circumstances, the Governor General signs off on the work of the elected House. Like in America, you still do that? Like in America, Parliament can fail to pass a budget or estimates bill. This could jeopardize the flow of dollars from the Consolidated Revenue Fund, that's the pool of money collected through taxes and government revenue, to government departments and public servants. However, for Canadians, in this case, we either go back to the ballot box to elect a new parliament, unlike the U.S., we can go to an election at any time, or the Governor General may ask the existing parties in parliament to form a coalition. Allison then asks, but elections or coalition negotiations take time, often months. What happens if the government needs money during such a period and there's no parliament? Why isn't the threat of service shutdown as severe in Canada? And Jane says, I wasn't sure about this at first either. So I asked scholar Mark Jarvis, who told me that Canada fortunately has a backup decision maker in the Governor General who can approve a special warrant that allows money to flow to the government without Parliament's approval. See, that's where, right, where Americans would have been apoplectic about that. The idea that even if they had been given the opportunity to have a local representation and to make their spending decisions, the idea that the Crown or the representative of the Crown all the way from Britain could say, we override your decisions, even if it's a good thing, like having money to operate. Whereas Canadians said, yeah, we understand this, we don't want to have interference from the Crown, but this is for good stuff, like making sure we get to continue to have a government. That's a very sensible decision. Anyway, so under this law, the special warrant, I guess, can only happen when 3 conditions are met. First, Parliament is dissolved, not prorogued. Second, a minister indicates that the expenditure is urgent for the public good. And third, the president of the Treasury Board reports there is no money remaining for the government to use. In this situation, the Governor General gives access to money from the Consolidated Revenue Fund. When a new parliament is formed, it retroactively reviews any special warrant and approves them. Most recently, special warrants, at least most recently in 2013, they were able to report that they were most recently used in 2011. Don't know if it's happened between then and now, but maybe you do. In 2011, that happened when Parliament was dissolved for the general election. Allison then says, well, why aren't we all breathing a sigh of relief to be here in Canada instead of dealing with the brinksmanship in the U.S.? I don't know. Why not? Brinksmanship and partisan squabbling still occurs in Canada. Did you know that? But there's less of a risk of gridlock here than in the USA. The U.S., period. A couple of reasons for this. First of all, unlike in the U.S., where the president is elected by all Americans and remains a separate entity outside of Congress, Canada's prime minister, of course, elected as a member of parliament, and must retain the confidence of the elected House of Commons to govern. This is easy enough to do in a majority situation for the PM's party, like the one they had right then. Though the opposition may try to stop a budget from going through, the stakes are high for MPs to withhold support for a budget, even in a minority situation. MPs risk an election, a costly endeavor that doesn't always result in re-election. The turnover for MPs is, in the past election, back in 2011, or in whatever was the previous election prior to 2013, was over a third. Second, Canada's parties exercise stricter party discipline compared to the U.S. That may no longer be true, necessarily. While not universally loved by all, it does contribute to a certain predictability and stability when it comes to important votes. In fact, over 600 votes between 2011 and 2013, even the one MP who dissented from his party the most still voted 98.5% of the time along party lines. The upside of party loyalty is that Canadians know what they're getting and government ticks along efficiently. The downside of party discipline is that healthy discussion between MPs can be seen as disloyalty to their party, and MPs often side with the party, leading Canadians to ask, who's my MP's boss, me or their party? That's the trade-off. Good question and answer session. Thank you, Brian, for passing that along. I think we were pretty much okay by saying, because Britain is the answer. But, to what extent? What do you mean because Britain? What was it that Britain did that you didn't do? And keep a parliamentary system is the answer. Okay, let's see. Anything else? Any other comments or inputs that we have to consider? There are many, of course. Let's see. Well, right, yes. And Ricky reminding me, of course, Canada, independent of Britain, but not the British throne. True. Yeah. By the way, did I read something at some point where there was Canada very recently, reconsidering, or was it Australia that was reconsidering, maybe we don't want to do this whole Commonwealth thing anyway. Maybe it might have been Australia saying we would, we'll still associate, as a English-speaking former colonial, associate, but I think they were actually thinking of formally replacing the Queen, the throne, the crown as head of state and having their own head of state, but wondering whether or not that jeopardized their, status in in the Commonwealth or something. But anyway, that's neither here nor there, especially if it is Australia, because then it really would. It's not neither here nor there in Canada. And I think the Australians aren't even awake to answer the question at this point. Okay, I don't know. What time is it over there? Somebody look that up. That could be the topic of discussion for the next hour or so. What's this? Let's see. Another comment coming in from our friend Warfare Class, Employee of the Month, Warfare Class, pointing me to a New Yorker magazine article. And, oh gosh, it's Canada. So, all right, why not? Maybe hour one of this show should be United States and hour two should be Canada. Maybe never again, but I mean, We Could Have Been Canada is the name of this piece. This also, a crusty old piece from May of 2017. Adam Gopnik, We Could Have Been Canada. Was the American Revolution such a good idea? That brings us back to the old Battle of Quebec. And by the way, there are two battles of Quebec with which I was familiar. The one that came to mind when Greg mentioned the smallpox vaccine was the wrong one. The one that comes to mind for me is the French and Indian War Battle of Quebec on the Plains of Abraham. 17, when were they fighting that war? 50 something, 59, 60, let's say, versus the 1775, early in the Revolutionary War, abortive attempt at the invasion of Canada, Battle of Quebec. That was the one with the smallpox problem. There was probably smallpox at the first one too, but it wasn't as big a deal. All right, we could have been Canada. That's true. Was the American Revolution such a good idea? And I guess maybe the idea here is, well, they're doing pretty well. They got great bacon, health care necessary. If you're going to have that kind of bacon and that kind of beer, you got to have universal health care. And it's a little cold, but doing okay, right? We could have been the same thing, but we were very bitter about Britain. Another way we could have ended up as Canada, though, was invading them, and then it really would have been more about them being us, but, we would still have had a single identity. But that's not what he's talking about. Do I need to? Well, I will say this sounds like interesting reading. Let me read you a paragraph or two and see if I can get you interested in it, but then come back to United States politics. This is unsustainable. What do we have here? And what if it was a mistake from the start, that is, the American Revolution? Different question. The Declaration of Independence, the American Revolution, the creation of the United States of America. What if all this was a terrible idea, and what if the injustices and madness of American life since then have occurred not in spite of the virtues of the Founding Fathers, but because of them? Or the 1884 framers of the Anti-Deficiency Act, for that matter. Or the 1917 players in the drama of World War I. The revolution, this argument might run, was a needless and brutal bit of slaveholders' panic mixed with Enlightenment argle-bargle. Pretty good. Producing a country that was always marked for violence and disruption and demagogy. Look north to Canada, or south, to Australia again, and you will see different possibilities of peaceful evolution away from Britain towards sane and whole, more equitable and less sanguinary countries. And I guess when you throw in the bit we learned about, just to connect it back to the other stuff we've been discussing today, the original terminology for the filibuster, right, as a sort of quasi-piratical, privateerish invasion of neighboring countries, often in the name of establishing satellite slave states in a ring around the entire Caribbean Sea, as it turns out, was the aim. You can see we certainly have assembled a peculiar track record here in the United States, having gone our own way. And I mean that peculiar in track record because it comes up right here. Not even a paragraph away does that word come back up again, right? We could have done it like the Canadians or Australians, right? Sane and whole, more equitable and less sanguinary countries. No revolution and slavery might have ended, as it did elsewhere in the British Empire, more peacefully and sooner. No peculiar institution. No hideous civil war and appalling aftermath, including filibustering around the world and trying to just simply privately take over otherwise sovereign states. Right. So no hideous civil war and appalling aftermath. Instead, an orderly development of the interior, less violent and less inclined to celebrate the desperado over the peaceful peasant. We could have ended with a social democratic commonwealth that stretched from north to south, a continent, near continent-wide Canada. That's a very intriguing topic. And it would eat up the rest of the show. And it might even be a good use of our time. I can't be sure. I can't promise you it's not. But I can promise you that I'll give you the link so that you can read it and decide for yourself, unless I force it on you after this. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning. I have good news to report. Many more listeners like you are making critical contributions that keep our show on the air. Makes good sense, of course, and patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple. Now you can make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for helping keep you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all of your support. We literally could not do this without you. All right, I'm late in coming back, but welcome to myself coming back to the show. Lots of additional commentary coming through, including the note, again, from Ricky, thank you, that it's about midnight in Melbourne, which really sounds like a great movie title, Midnight in Melbourne. Wake up. They may still be awake. Not listening, probably, though. Drifting off to sleep. Can't blame them. I am also alerted by Jay Fennell, who says here, you can find him, if you need to find him on Twitter, and you can't, it's a bunch of numbers. What are you, Jay? J19403. Not too bad. Is that your zip code by any chance? I don't know. Sounds like one. Giving me this information. FYI, that's how I know it's information. They changed the name of the town where they, quote unquote, educated Jim Thorpe to Jim Thorpe. Is that right? So it's now Jim Thorpe, Pennsylvania. I hadn't noticed that. He also points out it's about 40 miles away from a college I might know, Lehigh. I am aware of that college. It's true. I mean, you know, it's a tragedy and everything, but I mean, it is a college and people go there. But yeah, about 40 miles away, I suppose. So I drive through the area with some frequency. Yeah, less so lately, but well, the road signs still say Carlisle, as far as I know. Maybe the Pennsylvania legislature probably didn't appropriate the funds to change the road signs on the highways from Carlisle to Jim Thorpe. But I mean, I guess that'll tell you a little bit about how proud they are of the association. And it's not that they shouldn't be proud of Jim Thorpe or anything. And also it doesn't fit on the road sign to say, I'm sorry. It was tragic and perverse what we did to you, and we're also proud of you for persevering through it, but it's our fault for putting you through it in the first place. Jim, 5 miles. That doesn't fit, even if it's less miles than that. Anyway, okay, so it's Jim Thorpe, Pennsylvania. I didn't register with me. I skimmed through a little bit more of this. This is a great article, honestly. Thank you very much for pointing to it. I've already scrolled past where it came from. Our employee of the month. You get it again for sending us this article. It's fascinating, and it really is good historical background just for considering a lot of things that touch on politics. It's absolutely a very political article. And by the way, would be a great lesson to impart, teach it to the kids in school, in history. And it doesn't even, you'd be able to basically make a lot of the same points without without resort to critical race theory, not that you were really going to resort to critical race theory in the classroom. Anyway, even if they weren't trying to ban what they think is critical race theory, it's not being taught in secondary schools, so don't worry about it for one thing. But a lot of the same issues, because a lot of them are true. And basically the whole point of this article seems to be illustrating we have a very, distorted, how would we pronounce this word? We have a distorted mythology, a mythological view of the founding of the country. And I guess part of the whole American exceptionalism thing, the unspoken part of American exceptionalism is that we give ourselves permission to think only the best things about, we think the good things to the exception of all the bad things that actually happened in the United States and in its history, and that were done in its name, in favor of, we were just really nice people who made our way across the continent, building good things. Even the Native Americans who got the short end of the stick on the way across got some good stuff out of it. For instance, they would never have had Doritos or Keds. Yeah, like good trade, right? No. But, we have this very weird idea of how we grew up as a nation that's very comforting. And then you have people like Marjorie Trader Green who believe that actually has to be the truth of the way things were. Because if it wasn't so, we wouldn't be who we are today, which is the best country in the world and the richest country in the world. And only smart people are rich, and yet it builds on itself. It's a fascinating article for deflating that, and we really could spend a lot of time on it. And I'd feel fine about it, except the one thing I'd miss out on is telling you about Corey Lewandowski, which I told you about at the beginning of the show. You've doubtless, if you're curious and hadn't heard, you probably Googled him and said, oh my gosh. All right. So the true story, I don't know what it is. The more verifiable of the two stories circulating about Corey Lewandowski is fascinating in its own right. The rumors, also pretty fascinating. So Politico reported on the new verifiable-ish story. Don't know if it's true. He's, I'm sure, disputing it. But word comes from a big Trump donor that Corey Lewandowski has made unwanted sexual advances upon her. And that's the problem. That's the issue. Corey Lewandowski, I think we've heard before, makes unwanted sexual advances on a lot of people. But this time he did it to somebody who's a big Trump donor, and Trump doesn't want to not get their money. So that's a problem. The longtime Trump aide, the subheader here says, harassed her, this donor, at a charity event, a major Republican Party contributor alleges. Here's the story, again, as reported by Politico. Alex Eisenstadt reported this one. A Donald Trump donor is accusing Corey Lewandowski, one of the former president's longtime top aides, of making unwanted sexual advances toward her at a Las Vegas charity event over the weekend. We'll read all the way through it, but he's actually pretty super aggressive. It's more than unwanted sexual advances like, hey, what are you doing later? I'd like to take you out. That's not Corey Lewandowski. He's grabbing, he's threatening, he's stalking. That's the allegation. Now, there's a lot to this story. And if I just read it to you, you'd get it. But now I feel compelled to blurt some of this stuff out. Like, for instance, one is a big Trump donor, but it's not a huge Trump donor. I think, and they're kind of new, apparently, as Trump donors go. But this woman and her husband gave $100,000 to the Trump PAC recently. And I don't know that they have a long history, but $100,000 is enough to get attention at a Trump event. Second thing, her name. I don't know what's happening here. It's a matrix glitch. I don't know. I mean, her parents, I presume, are responsible for this name, unless she changed her name. But somebody has made a horrible, horrible mistake. I think that they thought they were inventing a new twist, as people love to do with names, possibly on Trisha, or, like short for Patricia or whatever, or Rochelle or Michelle or something, and they mashed this thing together. And so they went with, her name is Trishelle Odom. Odom is the last name. She's married to John Odom of Idaho. But Trishelle, but it's Trashelle. And they gave no thought whatsoever to the fact that they were naming their baby Trash L. I mean, is it like I had to stop. Is this a joke? Is this a Muppet character? A female Oscar the Grouch companion on Sesame Street? Trashelle, I haven't seen you in, since Garbage Day, I guess. Wednesday in Newtown. Trash. I'm sure she says Trishelle as opposed to Trashelle, but this is not good. This doesn't help in all of this. And I predict that it will be seized upon by the Trump forces, but whatever. Trishelle Odom, we're ignoring this now. She's a victim. We have to listen to her. Trishelle Odom, the wife of Idaho construction executive John Odom, alleges that Lewandowski repeatedly touched her, including on the leg and buttocks, and spoke to her in sexually graphic terms. Don't do that. Odom said that Lewandowski stalked her throughout the evening. That's uncomfortable. And the husband's there, which, I don't know. I mean, there's not much discussion of it. Maybe he's not. I don't know. But I got the impression that he was there. But, maybe Lewandowski wanted a threesome. I don't know. 4 people who were first-hand witnesses at the event corroborated Odom's allegations. So that's why we're talking about it as a verified story. Politico also spoke with 2 people, one of whom was at the event and another who was not. Why? Who described conversations they had with Odom, about the incidents immediately after they happened. On the evening of September 26th, so this is just the other day, in Las Vegas, Nevada, well, that happened there but didn't stay there, I attended a dinner to support a charity and spend time with wonderful friends, Odom said in a statement to Politico. I mean, I don't know what, maybe there was a charity dinner going on in Las Vegas and she was a Trump donor, but if is the charity supposed to be the Trump PAC? I don't know. That's a warped view of things. But anyway, that's not the issue. Though it is one, I really could talk about that for a while. Anyway, so she went to support a charity, spend time with wonderful friends, but instead she got a disgusting pervert. Odom said in a statement to Politico, she didn't say the part about the pervert, but we infer this. He repeatedly touched me inappropriately, that's the pervert part, and said vile and disgusting things to me also. Stalked me and made me feel violated and fearful, she said, referring to Lewandowski. I am coming forward because he needs to be held accountable, Odom continued. I am blessed to have a loving husband and family behind me. I want other women to know that you can be heard too, and together we can stop terrible things like this from happening, which is actually a pretty progressive message, and you should stop donating to Trump because Trump stands for the proposition that you can be grabbed by the pussy. Thank you for allowing me to say that on the radio. Whereas not just Democrats, but pretty much everyone else in the world stands for the proposition that you should not have to have that happen to you. And you can join a different political party and do something about that. What is annoying, of course, is you're backing the party that points and laughs and backslaps about that kind of stuff when it's happening to you. And there's another party, and forget the parties, still most people out there, probably even a lot of Republicans still today, will tell you, yes, that should not happen. But very few of them will take political action to try and do something about it before it happens, or do something about it after it happens, or acknowledge that it's even a problem. Instead, they say, feminism is ruining everything. It used to be you could grab women by anything you wanted, and I miss those good old days. P.S. Let's beat up black people. And you're like, there for that. Then you got grabbed, and now you're mad. So it's another one of those leopards eating faces issues. But, okay, now we have to listen to her. Well, right now we have to listen to David Chesnoff, a Las Vegas attorney representing Lewandowski. He didn't directly address the allegations, but he did say these words. Quote, accusations and rumors appear to be morphing by the minute, and we will not dignify them with a further response. Great. Moving on, Lewandowski, who did not respond to multiple requests for comment, has positioned himself as one of Trump's closest and most loyal advisors, a role he has leveraged to gain access to top Republican donors and, in some cases, their buttocks, and claim influence over the direction of the Republican Party. He was Trump's first presidential campaign manager in 2016, advised him during the presidency, and now is part of the circle of aides advising the former president. Keep note, by the way, somewhere in your back of your mind, he was the first presidential campaign manager. He was replaced. Then he was cut loose at some point, brought back. He was advising the president. He's in and out of Trump's circle all the time. That becomes important. All right. Anyway, continuing here, his duties included steering a pro-Trump super PAC until Wednesday. That was yesterday, after this article came out, when Trump spokesperson Taylor Budowich tweeted after publication of this article that, quote, Trump world, he actually used the words Trump world, which I use all the time to say things like Trump world is a sex cult. He tweeted that Trump world had severed its association with Lewandowski. So this is like the fourth time that they've severed their relationship with him. He keeps coming back. Like herpes. Now, that's funny because, well, not herpes, but it's funny that he's been replaced. He was, of course, as they said here, steering a pro-Trump super PAC. Guess who's steering the pro-Trump super PAC now? The answer is Florida woman Pam Bondi. She's still hanging around. Pam Bondi, the very talented and honorable former AG of Florida, and they had to put in brackets, the former, because the Trump spokespeople still say she's the Attorney General of Florida, has our complete faith and confidence in taking over the super PAC. Budowich's tweet read, Corey Lewandowski will be going on to other endeavors, and we very much want to thank him for his service. He will no longer be associated with Trump world. Pretty amazing. By the way, no acknowledgement of, like, also he's gross and disgusting. We may welcome him back. He's like leaving on good terms. Odom was one of about 24 major Republican donors at the Sunday dinner, which was held at the Westgate Las Vegas Resort and Casino's Benihana restaurant. It's class all the way. By the way, doesn't Trump have a hotel in Vegas? Does he still have it? Why wasn't it there? I don't know. Odom was seated next to Lewandowski during the gathering, part of a 4-day conference held by Victoria's Voice Foundation. A charity. There's the charity. A charity devoted to combating substance abuse, but promoting physical abuse, apparently. South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem, to whom Lewandowski serves as an informal advisor, and you're all laughing now, and I know why, was among the dinner's attendees. Why are we all laughing about that? Well, Kristi Noem, she's a joke to begin with, but he's a quote-unquote informal advisor. Yesterday afternoon, even as this story broke, the unverified and unverifiable, maybe for now anyway, story that broke as essentially as rumor, but broke internet-wide, was that people in South Dakota were saying it was an open secret that this informal advisory relationship was a little bit more like a let's all take our pants off relationship, and that Kristi Noem was having an affair with Corey Lewandowski. I don't know if that's true. It's gross enough to be true, but it could also just be anybody, including Trump world, saying this Kristi Noem, she's posing a real threat to me and my run for presidency in the 2024, and we want to make sure that she has to stand by. Of course, then he may turn around and make her his vice president or something like that. But he's probably convinced himself that Kristi Noem is a serious threat because she's hot. And people like the hot girls. And they might vote for her over me. I don't know. Don't know where it's coming from. And like I said, I read it in an online source that everybody pointed to and that wrote itself up as though it was a news report. and kept saying everybody knows, or it's an open secret. And there's links to other reports of other people saying, I think this too, but no newspaper articles. So it's still like, it's rumor at best. And it might be made up rumor at worst. So anyway, although maybe it would be worse if it was true. Let me continue with the Politico article. According to a statement provided by an Odom family attorney, Lewandowski allegedly remarked on the size of his genitalia. It's small and toadstool shaped, he may have said. He described his sexual performance, mostly, in and out, back and forth, basically, and showed Odom his hotel room key. He showed a hotel room key. What a charmer. After the incident, Odom told people that Lewandowski repeatedly spoke about sex while using expletives. Now, okay, so I will say this. When I read this description of it, I thought, well, that is a dry description of sexual harassment, to be sure. And in fact, it's kind of like, to be honest, I mean, without the details of it, it's kind of like, well, this sounds like somebody who's looked at a situation that may be highly questionable or could be much worse and described it in like the kind of legalistic terms that would force you to conclude that it had in fact been an incident of sexual harassment. But it seems like if you just tell me what he did and where he touched you and what he said to you, I'd be able to reach a conclusion. But instead it's this weird description of it. But it's Corey Lewandowski. He's probably disgusting. So I'm willing to believe it. Attendees also observed Lewandowski growing physical with Odom. Mrs. Odom stated that over the course of the dinner, Mr. Lewandowski tried to hold her hand, which is also just a weird addition to, like, that's not what I usually think of as sexual harassment, but it can be. But, I mean, there was buttocks before. I don't want to, like, say cut to the chase, but, I tried to hold her hand. Okay. And she pushed his hand away. All right. Good signal. It was it's helpful to include that as a signal, very clearly delineating the situation. This is inappropriate. This is uninvited. He then touches her leg and she moved it away. He grabbed her napkin off her lap and then tried to touch her leg again. Okay. Did the napkin really pose all right. And she pulled her dress over her leg to move his hand away and cover her skin. So, all right, enough already. We get it. He shouldn't be doing this. Now we get it, but enough already. You should be getting it. She doesn't want you to do this. Okay, so let's see. The statement continues. He touched her back and she tried to get away. He described an area where he was sore from a workout on the side of his own butt, but he demonstrated where the area was by touching her there on the upper side of her rear end. That's the second day in a row I've had to use rear end with Trump World. Lewandowski tried to touch her approximately 10 times, and Mrs. Odom always rebuffed him. Odom left the room, but was soon followed by Lewandowski. That's not good. Who remarked that she had a, quote, nice ass. This is an addition. These are the updates that were noted at the beginning of the article. I didn't tell you about it, but okay. Nice ass, according to the statement from her attorney and another attendee who heard the comment. Yeesh. Lewandowski also threw his drink at Mrs. Odom. This is really crazy. And it landed all over her shoe and the bottom of her dress, which I'm not that concerned about, and called her stupid, her attorney stated. Now we're talking about this is like a 6-year-old boy denied what he wants, and he's throwing things. You're stupid. I mean, and it was amazing. I had to read it twice. Like, throw a drink. I expected she would have thrown her drink on him. He throws his drink on her. I don't even know what the hell he's a drunk-ass pervert. Whatever. One event attendee who spoke with Politico said that Odom gave a detailed retelling of the incidents afterwards. We just heard it. Describing how she grew fearful for her personal safety, key words there, as Lewandowski described incidents of violence that took place earlier in his life. So I guess he's like telling stories about, him beating people up or whatever. Now she's afraid that she's going to get beat up. Then it began to occur to me, by the way, I mean, this is an uncharitable thought, but trying to reconcile the staunch republicanism and the sudden recognition that, sexual assault is a real thing and sexual harassment is a real thing and real people have to worry about it. Isn't the Republican solution to this? I want to suggest that you think about this. The Republican solution to this kind of sexual harassment of a woman who, is sure of herself and is sure she doesn't want anything to do with this, you're supposed to shoot the perpetrator, right? Defend yourself. You're carrying a gun. You're from Idaho. You haven't traveled to a gun-free zone, right? You're in Nevada. Why didn't you shoot him? It would be a much better story if Corey Lewandowski got shot at the end of all of this. Plus, people would have fewer doubts about what happened, I think. I think it puts a real exclamation point on the situation. But okay, she's more temperate than that. That's good. We don't want everybody shooting everybody all the time. Just Corey Lewandowski. One event attendee who spoke to Politico said Odom gave this detailed description, right? Then she became fearful for her own safety when he started talking about violent incidents in his own past. Odom and her husband are relative newcomers to the Republican donor scene. We mentioned that. And she told the attendee that she felt intimidated by Lewandowski's claims that he has control over the former president's orbit and can determine the fate of those around Trump. That probably had more to do with kicking him out of Trump world than anything else. Lewandowski said no candidate receives the president's endorsement without Lewandowski's approval, Odom told this other attendee. In the statement from Odom's attorney, Lewandowski is alleged to have said repeatedly that he is very powerful and can destroy anyone, and that he is close with President Trump and can get anyone elected or take anyone out. Corey was verbally and physically aggressive and forceful, Odom alleged in a statement. I was fearful for my physical safety. She continued, I was also fearful that Corey has the power to destroy and ruin everything my husband and I have been working on in our business, personal, and charitable endeavors. Two of the people present for the dinner described Odom as appearing uncomfortable, and 3 attendees said Lewandowski appeared to be intoxicated. Photos of the dinner reviewed by Politico show Odom posing for selfies with attendees. Several photos showed Lewandowski just above her right shoulder with his tongue sticking out of his mouth. Curious to see how he's doing that. There are different interpretations. Odom then left the restaurant for an after-dinner party in the hotel's lavish Verona Sky Villa, where witnesses described a chaotic scene. One person who interacted with Odom recalled seeing her in tears and pleading for help. By this time, she had been joined by her sister and stepson, who had accompanied her to Las Vegas. So I guess the husband wasn't there. Attendees said Odom retreated to the other side of the bar with her sister and stepson when Lewandowski came to the villa. Lewandowski followed her, at which point several other attendees tried to shield Odom from him. This is getting serious. Shepherding her to another part of the bar, according to 3 people who were present. According to Odom's attorney, Corey then moved around the bar with them and continued to try to touch Mrs. Odom. Attendees said Odom and Lewandowski left the party separately. Odom told one person and later recounted to the family lawyer that she had feared for her physical safety staying at the hotel that evening because her room was located next to Lewandowski's. Yeesh. She also told those people she timed her departure the next day to ensure that she did not cross paths with him. It's not the first time Lewandowski has been accused of unwanted touching. In late 2017, singer Joy Villa, a lot of villas in this story, filed a police report alleging the former Trump campaign manager slapped her buttocks during a holiday party at the Trump International Hotel in Washington, D.C. Lewandowski was also charged with battery in 2016 after yanking the arm of a reporter, Michelle Fields, at a Trump event. We all remember that. The charges were later dropped, but Lewandowski claimed the incident never happened before video emerged confirming that it did. The 48-year-old Lewandowski has long been one of Trump's top lieutenants. He was fired from his role as presidential campaign manager before Trump was nominated at the Republican National Convention in 2016, but he has remained a key figure in Trump's inner circles, serving as an informal advisor, wink wink, and one of his most prominent surrogates, wink wink. A Trump spokesperson did not respond to a request for comment. The word of the incident has shaken up the former president's inner circle. Several people familiar with the discussion said, there's a little bit more here, let's finish. After Trump lost the 2020 election, he personally tapped Lewandowski, wink wink, to helm the main pro-Trump super PAC Make America Great Again action. The perch has given Lewandowski access to some of the Republican Party's biggest donors. The list that included Treshelle Odom and her husband. And the couple has donated $100,000 to the super PAC, according to the two people familiar with the matter. They apparently want their money back unless he was kicked out. So Trump wants that money more than he wants Lewandowski. But those close to the Odom said the couple would ask for their money to be refunded unless he was terminated. That happened late Wednesday night. I love my wife and I want accountability now. John Odom, that's some statement. Treshelle's husband said in a statement, "We are exploring our legal options at this time to make sure Lewandowski cannot harm anyone else." Well, good luck with that one. I hope you really do have good luck with that one. I wouldn't mind seeing him removed from the scene, but I have a feeling Trump will rehabilitate him at some point and bring him back as he has every other time. But if he's going to cost him money, like really cost him money, then maybe he won't. Who knows? Let's see. Well, we'll be back tomorrow. Plenty to discuss tomorrow. Don't know what the hell any of those things are, but all of them are in pocket because we spent all our time on Canada and Corey Lewandowski and the Anti-Deficiency Act, which was fascinating. Oh, and World War I. So I enjoyed it. I hope you did too.
You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
If you didn't, and you wanted to hear about the January 6th committee issuing a new round of subpoenas in their investigation into the insurrection, well, Justice Putnam is your man, and the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is where you'll hear about it. And of course about that, plus his usual eclectic selection of stories from around the country and around the world. Stay tuned.